Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Adam and welcome to Jamsville. Today we're going to be talking about 5 tips that can improve your guitar playing today, right now, instantly. Let's get started. Tip number 1 is going to be to play and practice at all dynamics. For those of you that don't know what dynamics means, it's basically musical jargon for volume. Many times when we're practicing something, we like to practice at around a medium volume. Not too loud, not too soft. But when we're playing music for real, we need to be able to play at all dynamics. If you start practicing at different dynamics, including extremely soft and extremely loud, it'll be beneficial for multiple reasons. The first reason being that it can actually help you break through plateaus in your playing. For example, let's say you've been practicing your major scales and you're working on a segment that goes something like this. If I take that segment and practice it at different dynamics like soft, medium, and really loud, what it'll do is it'll actually create subtle variations for your brain to latch onto the movement better. Remember, even when you're playing really loud, something like this, you want to actually still try to stay relaxed even though you're playing loud. It is possible. Reason number 2 that this will help your guitar playing is that it'll help you sound more musical when you're playing music with other people. Dynamics help a lot to convey emotion in music, so adding this one thing to your playing will help it sound a lot more interesting almost instantly. Alright guys, tip number 2 to improve your guitar playing instantly is to stop anchoring your wrist on the bridge of the guitar. You don't need to, even though it seems like it. When I first started to get really serious about practicing guitar and improving my technique, one of the first things that I thought that I had to do was really plant my wrist on the bridge of the guitar and go from there. The logic being that you want to reduce all unnecessary movement in your picking hand, which is true to an extent. When I was doing this for years, I was really struggling to improve my right hand picking technique, and I was wondering why. It wasn't until much later that I discovered actually a huge part of the reason why I was frustrated with my picking hand technique was because I was anchoring my wrist on the bridge. The way that I figured it out was actually from practicing a Stevie Vaughan song, Hideaway and Rude Mood. I was mainly focused on trying to figure out the sounds that he was playing, but since it was a video, I couldn't help but look at how he was playing it. I couldn't believe how relaxed his hands looked when he was playing this unbelievably fast stuff. But at the same time, his hand was actually moving quite a lot. Then I realized part of the reason that he was able to play so relaxed is that he wasn't anchoring his wrists on the bridge like I was. I remember specifically that he was playing a riff that went something like this. And the way that he was playing it was so relaxed, it was unbelievable. I realized he was allowing his wrist to float through the air like he was strumming chords, but he was only hitting single notes. Now, even though he didn't have his wrist anchored on the bridge, he was still obviously controlling his movements a lot, but he was prioritizing playing relaxed over having the absolute lowest amount of movement possible. That was one of the problems that I had when I was anchoring my wrist. Now, I know that it works for a lot of people, but for me, it caused me to build up a lot of tension in my wrist, and the second that I stopped doing it, all this tension in my wrist went away, and I was able to play so much more easily and relaxed. Now, again, it might feel a little weird at first, because you do feel a little bit out of control, but if you practice like this for maybe a week, you'll get used to it really quickly. I then started to notice that also almost every other player that I love did the same thing. Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix. None of those guys anchored their wrists either, especially because they had their guitars hanging kind of low, so you can't even really get your wrist at that angle properly. I also noticed that a lot of other players that I thought were anchoring their wrists weren't actually doing that. It just seemed like it because they had their wrist positioned over the bridge like this, but it wasn't actually anchored onto it. Alright guys, tip number 3 to improve your guitar playing today is to practice chords more. Now, I know that most of us guitarists love to practice shredding through licks, scales, and patterns in an effort to play fast, but But one thing that we usually neglect is our chordal skills and accompaniment. After all, the guitar really is an accompanying instrument. Pushing your limits when it comes to practicing chords will help you for two reasons. Reason number one is that your left hand has to be much stronger and precise to be able to play chords just the right way. If you spend 10 minutes running through some really hard chord switching exercises and then go practice your single note stuff afterwards, I promise you, you'll notice that your left hand feels way better. Reason number two is you can seriously improve your picking hand technique by practicing strumming exercises. Doing some stuff like this can seriously help your picking hand technique a lot. The reason being that you actually need to really brush the pick just barely over the strings in order to make it work properly. If you're letting too much of your pick get caught in the strings, it'll feel way too resistant and hard to play. If you take this concept of barely brushing your pick over the strings and translate it to single note playing, it'll help a lot. Alright guys, so tip number 4 to improve your playing today is to listen to more music. Now this one should kind of seem like an obvious one. So even when you don't have a lot of time to practice, you can be actively listening to music throughout the day. You can do it while you're driving to work, doing chores, any number of things. If you're practicing a specific song on guitar, listen to that song as much as possible. If you listen to it about 20 or 30 times before you've even sat down to practice it, I promise you that once you do sit down and practice it, you'll learn it way faster. For me, listening to music just keeps me inspired to practice too. It might inspire a new idea for a new song of my own. It might inspire me to want to learn a new song. Any number of things. You can never listen to enough music, and everything that comes out of you is just a culmination of all the music that you've been exposed to and that you've worked on. Alright guys, last but not least, tip number 5 is to relax. Even more than you already do. I know that you guys have probably heard this advice a million times, but it still rings true. You need to relax when you're playing. If you aren't as relaxed as you possibly can, you're never gonna play as well as you can. One specific thing that I find helps me relax my technique a lot is releasing tension from the middle of my palms. Especially for your picking hand, you don't really need any tension in the middle of your palms at all to play properly. And this will have an effect that spreads to the rest of your hand and your arms. This also relates to tip number 1 of playing at all dynamics. I can practically guarantee that if you're not as relaxed as possible, you're probably playing really hard and playing everything generally loud and not with great dynamics. Now, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think it's worth noting that when you're playing music, there really is nothing to worry about. We should all feel really grateful for every opportunity that we get to sit down and learn about music or play with other people. Life is too short, and even if you had the worst performance of your life, which I know that you won't if you're prepared, relaxed, and listening, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Many people in this world, unfortunately, will never have the opportunity to even touch a guitar, much less actually sit down and practice it and be able to play with other great people. If we can all have that mindset and that perspective, then no matter what situation we're in, as long as we have a guitar in our hands and we're playing music, we're gonna have fun. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you learned something from the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like what I do here, please consider subscribing. I'm gonna have new great content coming up weekly and you don't wanna miss it. Now my question for you guys is, what musical discoveries have you made that have helped you get to the next level in your playing? Alright guys, until next time, listen, learn, and jam.